The Hawkins Scale 100 to 200. Hello, this is Shores of Infinity with your host Chris, and today we're going to talk about the Hawkins Scale 100 to 200. Evil. Or is it? Are people and groups of people evil who are centered in this range of, or their consciousness is centered in the range of 100 to 200. It seems so. If you calibrate famous dictators, I will not name any of them here because I don't know if I get into trouble with YouTube, but you know who I mean. Famous dictators, mass murderers. On a global scale, hundreds and thousands and millions of people. If you calibrate them, they usually calibrate between 100 and 200. So does this mean that this range of the scale means evil? Is that what humans mean with evil? Well, if you have a look, what Hawkins found in this area is 100 is fear, then desire, anger, pride, and courage. 200 is courage. 200 is the breaking point. 200 is where people kind of wake up from their traumatic slumber and start to be more or less responsible people. The current average of humanity is around 205. So before courage we have desire, anger, and pride. Desire leads to enslavement, either of yourself or others, because you want more and more and more and more, and there is not more and more and more. If you want more and more and more and more, you have to take away from others. And that, of course, you could call evil. Then we have anger. Anger can be very helpful. With the help of anger, you can get out of the prison of grief and apathy and shame and guilt and fear. That is the topic of 0 to 100. So anger can be liberating, but anger can also be hate and aggression and over the top, like we have also seen with these famous dictators and mass murderers. Yeah? If you hate a certain group of people, and then it can lead to the attempt of extermination. And then pride. Pride is the most tricky of all. Pride has been called the emotion of the devil, or the one that the devil is preying upon. Of course, there is no devil. There is no God and there is no devil, but that's what we imagine there would be. Pride is arrogance. Pride is to feel greater than you are. Pride is to feel better than others. Pride is to feel entitled. And this is exactly what some billionaires, for example, are doing, or have been doing for the last hundreds and thousands of years. They feel better and more entitled. They feel to be aristocrats. And what does aristocrat mean? To be better. The rule of the better ones, of the best. Pride leads to demanding things of others. I deserve this and that, and so I demand it. The interesting thing here is that anger and pride lead to courage, and courage leads us out of this force field of negativity that is the first 200 on the Hawkins scale. The force field of trauma and pain and suffering. For if you have a look at the lives of those mass murderers, like Mr. H and Mr. S and so on, during the 1930s, 40s and 50s, for example, what you see in their childhood is trauma and abuse. And for severely traumatized people, they usually have two choices. Well, they have three. But the most common ones are either to blame yourself or to blame others, to find a scapegoat. Those are the common choices. The less common choice, the third choice, is of course to do trauma therapy. But if you also have a narcissistic personality disorder, some other personality disorder, even psychopathy, you don't even get the idea to do trauma therapy. Why? Because it's too scary. To go there seems like to go back to 0 to 100. So all this pride and aggression and arrogance, that seems to be a better place to be than the prison of grief. So some people think, okay, it's better to torture and to exploit others than to do it to myself. I can't get out of this vicious cycle, so at least I can go to another place where I can play the big boss. From a higher point of view, all these horrible people, as we might think, are just like this frog here on the picture. Overinflated parodies. But that doesn't mean that an overinflated parody cannot be dangerous. Especially if you look at Mr. H, a famous dictator in the 30s and 40s in Germany. He was a loser, a pathetic loser, until he served in the war, in the First World War, and there became a war hero, because what he did not lack in was courage. He didn't know anything, couldn't do anything. He was an okay painter, but that was it. But what he had was courage, partly because he didn't mind losing his life. That's the Doc Holliday syndrome, the famous gunslinger. If you don't mind dying, then of course you can be very courageous. So although he was a pathetic loser, he found out that there was one thing he was good at: war. And for some reason he managed to inflict his internal war upon the whole of Europe. He wanted to play war outside instead of war inside, and that he did. Was he evil? Maybe. He was definitely a psychopath and a narcissist. Lots of personality disorders. An accomplished liar and a very good actor. Actually, he was a much better actor than he was a painter. If he had become an actor, he would probably have been one of the greatest actors of the 20th century. But unfortunately, he chose a political and martial career. He had a terrible childhood and was beaten daily by his father until his father passed away. And he was full of shame and guilt, especially shame. Shame was probably the one emotion that most dominated him. And to get out of this, he chose pride and anger instead. Most of these great dictators choose pride as their dominant emotion and motivation. What drives them is this arrogance, this turning around, this Adlerian turning around from a minority complex to megalomania. Very well portrayed by Sacha Baron Cohen in the movie The Great Dictator. Or also, of course, The Dictator by Charlie Chaplin, if you like older movies. So I would not go so far as to call it evil. Of course, you could call it evil. But from a higher perspective, it's not evil. It's a sort of weakness, unbearable weakness, that is turned into some form of arrogance. So for me, 100 to 200 on the scale is the partition of arrogance. We have several psychologists and philosophers who talked about this. Adler, for example, and Reich, and Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, a great female philosopher, grew up in Germany, studied under Heidegger, and then fled to the USA. And what she meant with the banality of evil is that what evil actually is an inconsideration of other people, of other people's needs. If you only look at yourself, what you need, what you want, desire, but totally ignore what other people might need, then this can lead to evil. Once you start labeling other people, or some other people, as inferior, or even as not human, then this is what causes evil. Because if they are inferior, or even not human, then you can treat them as cattle, or as vermin. But at the heart of it is an insensitivity, a very strong insensitivity of walled off pain. And if you suppress your own emotions, then maybe you're also blind or cold towards the emotions of others, or the suffering of others. In psychology, this is also called projection. You project a part of you that you don't want to see, that you don't want to have, that you don't want to feel, on some kind of outside object, a scapegoat. And on this scapegoat you can project all the scorn and hatred and fear, and exact your revenge and punishment. Not on the person who actually inflicted it upon you, but on someone else. So what you're actually projecting outwards is this dark aspect of yours, your shadow. Instead of dealing with it, you project it onto others and think they're the bad ones, they're the evil ones, or they're the inferior ones. They are to blame. And if we only exterminate this vermin, then everything will be fine. But the problem, of course, is inside. So below 200, you're not able to do this. You're not able to look inside. You always project everything outwards onto others. You don't have the consciousness, literally, you don't have the level of consciousness to see that it has something to do with you and that you need to heal yourself. That it is not the world around you that is the problem. It's always easy to complain. You probably know a lot of people who complain all the time about external circumstances or other people. All the time someone else is to blame. Deep inside they know, of course, it's their own problem, but they don't want to look at it. It's too painful. Because they're afraid to slide back into the 0 to 100 bracket. So it's much easier to create an artificial field of entitlement, of arrogance, of feeling better, of being some sort of aristocrat, and to exploit the inferior ones, the enemies, or to wage war upon them. And this is as critical and important and actual as it has been 70 years ago or 100 years ago. Now we have a couple of wars in front of our doors, and there you are. That's also the reason for war, is people who are centered in Hawkins Scale 100 to 200. They cannot think of another solution than war. Either to enrich themselves, or to defend themselves, or to justify themselves. The real reason being that they do not want to look at their pain. They cannot. And they don't want to hear about it. And even if it was possible to talk to them, they would say, yes, of course I feel pain. Because those others, they're evil. And they hurt me and my family and my people. So we need to strike back. We need to kill them before they kill us. The internal war is projected outwards on an external war, and the search for healing becomes a search for glory. And instead of spirituality and the search for your soul and your intuition, you search for things to possess and things to be proud of, or even to die in the name of a higher cause, or what you perceive as a higher cause, like war again. You can see the injustice in the world, only you think it can be solved by more killing, more suffering, more pain. What is impossible to see is that we're all sitting in the same boat. We're all sitting in the same boat, the whole of humanity. There's no one alone. No one is isolated, and it's not possible to inflict damage or injustice upon others and not onto yourself. In the end, that is not possible. But unfortunately, below 200, you cannot see that. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing, for joining me on Patreon. And thank you to all my Patreons. Namely, Feike, Bob, Sayan, Ofi, Andre, Chris, Tamas, Rubina, Kim, Gabriel, Daniel, Kerry, Matthias, Robert, Brian, Björn, Mark, Patricia, Kelly, Goshen, Gregory, Alex, Tyler, Alex, Marcus, Thomas, Raghu, Inda, Chris, Brittany, Patrick, Sam, and Alan. Thank you for supporting this channel.